Watch the problem that this Maserati has right here. We're just gonna get in it like we're gonna go for a normal drive. And, you know, it's been unlocked. We got a red light blinking on the dashboard. That's our security light. Wait for it. You didn't have to wait that long. Now here's the keys. The security light's still flashing. You know, my cheap Italian car obsession has turned into quite a catastrophe. I'm still sure to keep a warm place in my heart and a dead patch of grass for each one of my cheap Italian cars, but today I'm coming to grips with the idea of selling at least half of the Italian cars I have, and I've already lost count. We're going to start by putting one for sale in just a moment, plus get a huge update on the Ferrari 599 project, where V-Tune and his brothers have made an incredible amount of progress prepping the frame and the body to be completely finished, and while doing everything on a super budget, like with its airbag system, which I thought was going to be the biggest cost burden of the entire project. Doing just a little bit of cross-referencing online, I noticed that there was another Italian-made car that used very similar shaped airbags, and it turns out they weren't just similar, they're the same exact things, and they literally cost a fraction. In turn, we saved over $5,000 with this hack. And this is coming right along. I know I've been saying that for several years now, but literally in just 3 or 4 hours after removing the rear bumper, we've got this transmission in my Ferrari 360 converted from an F1 to a manual. Of course, we're doing the gated manual transmission swap on this car that requires no removal of the transmission. That's why it only took a few hours to put the manual actuator on there. I'm going to show you exactly how it went in. It's really straightforward. But first, we really got to take care of something really overdue on my Maserati Coupe GT. This is a car I never really featured in its own video, and I've owned it over 2 years. It's probably the nicest conditioned Italian car I own. It has just 25,000 miles on the clock. It's had 2 owners, and it's got a clean title and a 6-speed manual transmission, something really, really rare in these cars. And the time that I've owned it, I've only driven it maybe 200 or 300 miles. And the other day when I was pulling it out of the garage for the first time in a very long time, I noticed that the oil change sticker is still up on the windshield, recommending new oil in the year 2011. So this car hasn't had an oil change since at least 12 years ago. Now, the styling of this Maserati inside and out is definitely debatable, but I think something that most car guys can agree with me on is that this has one of the most beautiful engine bays ever produced. I think it looks even better than the Ferraris that came out around the same time. It's got these awesome powder-coated red valve cover gaskets with the Maserati script on top. And it's not like some of these other cars you see where they hide everything under a bunch of elaborate engine covers. No, this is the engine right here. And then some of the wires, some of the stuff that might clutter up an engine bay are all hidden under the trim pieces here. That's where our oil fill is and the dipstick itself. So I left the dipstick out here, and we're gonna do this oil change just a little bit different. I've made a giant mess the last few times I've done oil changes, dropping things out of the drain plug. So I've got my siphon pump here. Basically, this tube is gonna go where the dipstick was, and it should siphon most, if not all, the oil. So we'll just kind of rest the pump here, and then the outlet is going to go into an old oil container that's 5 quarts. So we'll get a very close measurement as to what comes out using this method. Now, most of the time underneath the hood of your car, there's either a battery here or there's a place to jumpstart the car. I'm sure there's something under this box here, but you can see the condition. Everything's really nice. And instead of fooling around and finding those terminals, I have so many spare car batteries lying around. I've already got it hooked up to a good working one here. All we have to do is hit this, and we should see it go to work. All right, we're getting near the 5 quart line, and I hear the pitch changing in our pump already, like it's running out of oil to siphon. So I'm just gonna jiggle it a little bit and make sure. Oh look, I found some more. We're pretty much slowing down to nothing here, which is surprising because we've collected less than a full quart in our second jug. So let's go ahead, we'll get this up in the air a little bit, and we'll see how much oil was left in the system. For right now, we're going to do our very innovative airbag lift to get this thing off the ground so you can get to its drain plugs. I see why only a little over 5 quarts came out. There's our drain plug right there, but see how shallow the oil pan is? That's because this car has a dry sump. When you see these lines in these Italian cars, that means it's going to a tank. I noticed there's a plug right here, and boom, that bolt should release whatever's left in the sump, and that's probably all we just drained. We need to get the oil out of the pan. Now, can you tell me why the Italians decided it was a good idea to put directly under that drain plug the oxygen sensor wiring? I don't know how in the heck we're going to get around that without getting that all dirty. We'll just have to clean it afterward. Let's start with seeing how much oil is left in our sump, and that'll give us an indication of how good those electric siphon pumps really are. Oh, there we go. Wow, there's still a good amount of oil left in that sump. All right. I would just guesstimate that there's maybe a quarter or a third of a quart of oil left over in our sump that was missed by the vacuum. So especially when the car has not had an oil change over a decade, you probably want to get the rest of that oil out. Luckily, I just ordered a set of crush washers for another project, but I will be putting a fresh one on the plug that just came out of the sump. Now let's go get the rest out of the oil pan and we'll finish up. All right, I'm taking a risk. I'm leaving this piece of mesh in the way. I feel like if it drops straight down, which it never does, we'll be clean. Let's see here. Come on.
This is why I shouldn't have nice things.
Like usual, when you try and skip a step, you end up adding 2 more to the job. Now this is all full of oil. And it only came off with 4 bolts. I really played myself on this one. Either way, we'll get this cleaned up. We'll get some fresh oil on that crankcase and be done with this job. To get to the fill line just now, we had to put in 9 quarts of oil, which is definitely a lot, but that's because we have a dry sump. And honestly, when I bought this car, I had no clue that it came with a dry sump. And now I'm very impressed, because what other Italian-made sports car are you gonna buy that comes with a manual transmission, whether you get the flappy paddles or the stick shift, and an Italian-made V8 with a pretty exotic exhaust tone that is supposedly made on the same assembly line as the Ferraris. I mean, these things are a relative bargain to, say, like a C6 Corvette, but with the cheap upfront cost, it comes with some expensive upkeep. I was reading online that the oil change for this car at the dealer costs north of $800, which is insane, and it does take kind of an unconventional oil weight of 40 weight. Luckily, Pennzoil Platinum has a 40 weight Euro spec oil that you can readily get at Walmart. I just get it delivered straight to my house, and by the time I bought an OEM oil filter and 2 jugs of Pennzoil Platinum Euro spec, I'm in this oil change less than $100. When you do the job yourself, you know that the job's done right and that you're using the best quality product for your car. For me, that's Pennzoil Platinum, and I encourage you guys to check it out down at the link in the description box below. And I want to thank them very much for their continued support of the channel, for making videos like this possible. Now check this out. I just popped the key remote open here. You can already see what the problem is. See that button? It broke out of place. It was right where these 2 connectors are right here. You could see where this one is still in the right place. That's for the trunk open. So all we need to do is kind of just clean this board up a little bit. We're going to solder this button right back in place, and hopefully it'll bring back our lock and unlock button and shut that darn alarm off. I got the button soldered back on the circuit board. Look at how the battery goes in the fob here. It just is held in place with this little band that looks like it could break off at any time. It's amazing to think that these cars were $75,000 new. All right, I went ahead, flipped the battery switch back on. Here is our key fob that we just repaired. There's lock. There's unlock. When we look, that red security light is now off the dashboard. We have fixed our problem with just a little bit of solder and flux. Well, it's far from being perfect. I'd argue that its condition is substantially better than most of the other Maserati Coupe and Cambrio Corsa cars you will find for sale on the market today. Back when these cars were released, they depreciated so heavily that people snapped them up a few years later. They used and abused these things, so it's hard to find one with relatively low miles. This one has 25,000 miles on the clock, and I just need to make a lot of space, not just physically here, mentally. So whoever is the high bidder will take this home over at Mods and Miles. There's a link down in the description box. And since I'm selling my only Italian car with a stick shift, we've got to create its replacement over there in the barn. Let's go ahead and install a cable shifted manual actuator on our green Ferrari 360. Now, when it comes to attacking the F1 actuator, we're going to do so from the rear of the car. I've got it up off the ground specifically so I can show you a little easier all the different bolts holding on the rear bumper. Once we remove this rear bumper, it's going to make the job of getting to the F1 actuator much simpler. So if you look at it just from under the car, this is some insulation here for all the F1 fluid lines, and that is what is running to the actuator, which is covered up by our rear bumper diffuser here. I've taken this bumper off a number of times. It's super simple as long as you know where all the fasteners are. Start right here at this bracket. These two bolts are going to come off. Then you go to the center where you'll find 4 bolts. And now there's a shim and some hardware back there. Make sure you don't lose it as you're pulling it off. Make sure you unclip your wiring harness right here if you're in the US, and you have these bumper lights. Everything's symmetrical on the opposite side. Once it's all loose, this will literally shimmy right off. There's just one last wiring connector to take off in the center of the bumper. So what I've done right off the bat is I've loosened up my catalytic converter clamps here and back there. That'll give us just a tiny bit of movement left to right on our catalytic converter, which is very close to our F1 actuator. I went ahead and removed all 4 nuts holding on this heat shield here, just 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. So this should just kind of get up and out of the way. There we go. And this is the guy we're trying to remove right here, our F1 actuator. It's this whole entire assembly. And again, it's held on with a bunch of fasteners like these nuts up here. But to make our lives easier, we're going to remove all the hydraulic lines that run to it. I've got a little drain bucket here. I want to start by just cracking open all the bolts holding on the hydraulic lines on our actuator here. A bottle of brake parts cleaner is really handy when you're taking this all apart. You want to store these parts really clean when you put them away. I've got all of our lines sitting off to the side here with plastic bags and rubber bands around them, so whenever we take the entire F1 assembly out of place, it stays nice and neat. But for right now, we're just going to want to focus on every single little thing holding the actuator in place. There's a ton of nuts, there's some brackets and whatnot, and pretty much everything here that you see that's in the way can come out. And now for the exciting part. We got a little audience here waiting for us to pull off our F1 actuator. All the nuts, all the fasteners that are holding it in place are off. The only thing holding it is a little bead of sealer in between this portion right here. And so we want to be gentle in removing this. It shouldn't be too hard. I do have a pry bar, and I notice that right here, in between the back part of the actuator and the transmission housing, looks like a nice safe place to pry. You do not want to go anywhere near where the sealer is because you do not want to scratch that mating surface. So if we go, I've got this here. I'm just going to go real gentle. You see it's already coming apart. Let me get 2 hands on this and we'll just yank this sucker off. All right, here we go. I think it's coming. Yep. All right. We want to be gentle with this, obviously. All right, we're out. The back right corner of the Ferrari 360 looks like a jumbled mess, but don't let it intimidate you. It's actually very simple to remove this F1 system. Start over here where you're going to disconnect the junction here. These are some F1 fluid lines. You're going to take these nuts off, and once this is free, you can also go ahead and pull this quick disconnect, pull it backward, and it's literally going to pop the hose right off, and then that hose will come out from the bottom with ease. Then you're going to come over here where you've got the fluid reservoir, you've got the F1 pump, and you've got all the solenoids that actuate the gears. There's 6 solenoids, 1 for each gear, and then there are pigtails that run to each one of them that you can easily feel on the side, plus an additional one up top. So 7 that run there, 1 pigtail that runs to the F1 pump here. Once all of that is disconnected, you can go ahead and take off 4 nuts. There's 1 here, 1 back here, and then 2 more in the quarter panel, you'll be able to feel them pretty simply because there's a ton of room back here, but you're not going to be able to see them. So use a mirror or something similar to help you see those. Once all 4 of those nuts are out, this whole entire thing will literally lift up and out with the hoses that we just disconnected from the actuator down below. There we go. I'm going to hold this with the plastic because this is a fiberglass hose and you don't want to get that in your fingers. But otherwise, this should just come up and out. There it is. Now our manual actuator is a bit smaller than the F1 actuator, so it'll fit in here really nice. We just have to remove a couple quick studs before we put it in place. Now I have this nice stud extractor right here. You can see there's some rollers inside. So it basically just slips over the stud and it grips itself in place. You kind of just got to hold it and turn. I like this kit in particular because it typically doesn't mess up your studs like some of the more aggressive ones, but we do want to be real careful because we don't want to strip the outside threads. It will make it harder for one of these tools to work. And right there, I just felt it break and it's coming out just like if it were a nut or a bolt. And right there is one stud extracted perfectly. Here's the F1 unit we just took off the car and we're replacing it with the manual one right here. Now obviously the F1 unit was actuated through the hydraulic lines that went in here, and our manual one has this lever, and then we're going to have shift cables that go to these arms and brackets here, and as the shift cables get pulled in and out, you'll see this will change our gears. Now it's super important to pay attention to our gear selector here and its orientation when we take it off the car. Pretty much every single Ferrari 360, when you shut the car off, it reverts back to neutral. That is its neutral position. So we need to get this gear selector in its neutral position, especially if it's sitting over like this or whatnot, because if you were to install it looking like this, well, it's not going to work when you go to use it. So I'll go ahead, I will tilt our lever upward here. I'm just going to go ahead and push it in the center. And you'll feel it click into place. It should be set, and we can move the plunger back and forth just very gently, and it's not going to click. Actuators in place. Our gasket maker is still pretty fresh, so all I'm doing is getting the nuts, and then there's a bolt that the kit comes with that goes right there. I'm getting them to touch the front of the mating surface here, and I'm going to leave it for the time being. After about 24 hours, we can go and tighten them all the way, but while our gasket maker is still a little wet, you just want it basically finger tight, and that's why I'm doing this all by hand with no power tools. And like I showed you before, this kit comes pretty much completely assembled down to the hardware. So here are our brackets, and those are going to mount into the holes that we just took the studs out of, and the hardware is already in there with these cable ties attached, so you know exactly how it sits. So this guy is going to sit pretty much like that, and then I've already got the upper one fastened in place in the upper stud that we took out there. It's really as simple as plugging and playing this thing. All right, our manual actuator installation is complete, and this is really cool because you can see exactly how a manual transmission works. All we have to do is install 2 shift cables, one to this bolt here, one to that bolt here, and those shift cables, as we move the shifter from the interior, well, it's going to move these arms, and that's what's going to select our gears. This lever right here controls the left to right movement of our gearbox, and this one is the up and down or gear selector. So as we move this forward and back, it's like we're in neutral, just moving the stick shift left and right. But if we move this back a little bit and then take this plunger and push it forward, right there, we just selected a gear. Now, if we push this plunger back in the middle, you'll see it kicks that right back into neutral, and we can freely move it again. Now once these shift cables are hooked up, they're going to run straight into the interior of the car where there's already access ports for them. Like I've told you before, these Ferrari 360s and 430s are virtually identical from the factory, so to manual swap them is super simple. I mean, I thought that this actuator was going to be the most difficult part of the process, and it turns out this was much easier than the clutch install, and the clutch install was relatively easy. So this is a very slick DIY install kit in case you have a Ferrari 360 or a 430, I'm going to drop a link to the Dr. S manual swap kit down in the description box. Now, let's head up north to the V-Tune garage, where V-Tune's brother Mark has been doing a lot of body work to prep the entire Ferrari 599 for a complete paint job, and he's been preserving some of the slightly damaged body panels so that we don't have to buy new ones, because on these V12 Ferraris, the body parts are ungodly expensive. Most namely, a replacement hood in good condition was about $5,000, but we bought one for a fraction of the price. It needed a little bit of work.
What's up, guys? It's Mark over at motorhead.co, and we are working on Sam Crack's Ferrari. Just want to give you guys a little update. So currently we are trying to fix this hood right here. If you look on the Ferrari prices, a hood like this would probably cost like anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 depending on the condition. But Sam actually got this hood for $500, and it is made of fiberglass, and it's kind of hard to get fiberglass perfect. As you guys know, even if you were to buy a super expensive fiberglass kit, you're still gonna have to get it right. So I have been blocking it out, and as you can see right here, this is how the hood was. And from a simple block, you can see there's low spots and whatnot. This is actually a replica of the 599 GTO. It's a really rare Ferrari. I think this hood's gonna look really cool. It does have these cool vents right here, as opposed to the original Ferrari hood that just has a 2 right there. And also, the front bumper is fiberglass. Ben actually did a bunch of fiberglass repair on it, and now it's ready. We're gonna go ahead and sand this all down and throw some kitty hair on it and throw some Bondo on it, and it's gonna look super nice. And the side skirts also had some damage, which V-Tune already fixed. So we're just gonna throw some Bondo on this and get all this primed. Then we can strip the car down and throw a nice all over paint job on it, and it's gonna look super awesome. We're gonna go back with the original color. The white looks really good, and it hides body work because Mr. Sam here decided to buy a $500 hood for a $100,000 Ferrari. But it wouldn't be a Sam Crack job if it didn't have something like that going on with it. We're gonna take care of it and make it look good for him. So stay tuned, guys.
The Ferrari 599 is the first crash car I bought in a very long time, and it's probably going to be the last crash car I buy for a very long time, because it's tough to make these things make financial sense when they're all said and done. But V-Tuned and his brother Mark are making it happen with things like fixing up that cheap fiberglass hood. Now, when it comes to the body work, it is a bit of a toss-up, because what you save up front, you need to spend on supplies and time. Mark is a very talented auto body tech. V-Tune, a very, very talented frame guy. I want you guys to check out their channels down in the description box. They're going to be producing several more videos on this Ferrari 599 until it's finished. And well, all I got to do is get him a few more parts. Now, speaking of parts, airbags, in my opinion, are one of the most overlooked cost burdens of any rebuild that people generally don't calculate, because you think you're going to grab some old used airbags off of a junkyard car, and well, for Ferrari, that's generally not the case. When I looked up these 599 airbags online used, I found a set, but they were in the tan color, and my car has a black interior. They wanted $3,000 plus for 3 used airbags. So I looked up new parts prices, and each airbag was over $2,000. So over $6,000 would have bought us the 3 airbags we need in the right color. So I had to ask, is there a chance that there's some other mass-produced Ferrari or other Italian car that uses these same airbags? And well, I found the answer real quick. If you look at the Maserati Quattroporte and you look at it next to the shape of the Ferrari 599 airbag, it's identical. The only thing that's different is the emblem in the center and the 2 studs that stick out the back that go into the steering column. They're just a little bit of a different shape. So I took the gamble of $50, because that's how much these things are selling for. There are just so many available for sale at Parts Breakers. $50 for a Maserati steering wheel airbag. And guess what? V-Tune took a look at it, and all it took was swapping the frame from one airbag over to the other, and the emblems even came off while he had the airbag apart. So he was able to install the Ferrari horse on our Maserati airbag. And instead of spending over $2,000 for one airbag, we got it for just $50. On top of that, the dashboard airbag, even though they have two separate part numbers, is identical to a Maserati Quattroporte's dashboard. And last but not least, the door airbag, well, it's not the same as a Maserati Quattroporte, but what it is the same is a Maserati Gran Turismo. That airbag cost a couple $100, but again, these cars are much more mass produced than the Ferraris. So in total, we spent around $300 for all three airbags, which at a minimum would have cost us well over $3,000, and we would have had to dye the leather on those. So a huge cost savings, but it goes to show you, it might not be the fastest way to rebuild a car, but you can generally hack the system and save yourself a considerable amount of money when building these exotic cars. Now guys, if you enjoyed this update to the Italian car fleet, make sure you give the video a huge like. Also, if you're not already following me on Instagram, where I have pictures of the new projects that are coming to the channel there before anything goes live on YouTube, well, just follow me or hit the link down in the description box. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching today, and I'll catch you very soon.